Good evening. You're watching Bharat Voice. I'm Ritika Acharya, joined live from Bangalore, India. And today we have with us Taha Siddiqui. Taha is a journalist and he's also a professor of journalism at the Sciences Expo at Paris, France. And he's also the founder of Safe Newsrooms. Taha is from Pakistan, and due to difficult circumstances, Taha, his wife, and his child had to leave Pakistan in a difficult situation, had to be in Paris. Now, we'll come back to his story, but he's someone who knows entirely about the Pakistan current situation. So let's get on with it. Taha, welcome to Bharat Voice.
Thank you for having me.
Taha, I really want to understand about the situation currently in Pakistan, because the situation is obviously of instability. Do you think that Imran Khan right now is completely down and out, or do you think that the instability is going to dog Pakistan for a really long time? How does it look like to you?
Well, I mean, after the vote of no confidence that he could not survive, he's basically gone into what we will call opposition right now. His members from the parliament have all submitted their resignations to the parliament, and they are demanding immediate elections. At the same time, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is the party of Imran Khan, has also said that they want to have not just immediate elections, but also if the immediate elections are not called for, they will do street-wide protests and they will hit the roads in the coming days. Imran Khan is doing a charity drive for that. Also, we've seen that the first such gathering happened just a day ago in Peshawar city, and he has called for similar sort of gatherings in Lahore and Karachi. And these are urban centers where Imran Khan has a lot of clout and a lot of following. Similarly, also right after his ouster through the parliament, we saw many people coming out on the roads voluntarily and protesting in big numbers. Thousands of people came out on the roads. So he does have a following in urban centers, which do feel that he has been wronged, even though there's nothing wrong with the way he was removed. It was a parliamentary process. And because of that, we are going to see a lot of trouble in the coming days, especially because one of the reasons we were seeing one of the things that we're seeing from the military, from the supporters of PTI, is that they are blaming the military for orchestrating all of this. So there's also that tension. There's been arrests ongoing right now of PTI workers because they are maligning the military online. There's been a trend on Twitter which has been going on against the military. So there's a lot of political uncertainty and turmoil, and it won't just be easy to move on and go ahead and have business as usual, especially given the fact that there is economic challenges to deal with. There are diplomatic challenges to deal with for the new government, and then this opposition, which was a government a few weeks ago, has now become a very strong opposition and wants to have elections immediately. So we are going to see a lot of push and pull in the political circles.
But then, Taha, isn't it more like because in the circles, the discussions that's doing the round is that it's almost like the army has used Imran Khan, and that's what he claims. And back in the days when the Tehreek-e-Insaf was used by the army, and then now when the rosy relationship is over, they threw him out of power. But then, do you think that this is more like General Bajwa could now come to power? This has been his long overdue plans.
I mean, I don't think Pakistan has right now the appetite to sort of, go for a military coup. I don't think internationally also it will be accepted. And the military has realized and learned its lesson after doing several coups that it would rather rule the country through creative methods of planting and installing someone that will be favorable to them. And that's why they installed Imran Khan into 2018, who was a favorable man. But then Imran Khan fell out of favor with the military last year when Imran Khan wanted to appoint his own ISI chief, or as what we know, that he wanted the previous ISI chief to continue because he thought that ISI chief was favorable to him. And when he started interfering in military matters, that's when the military basically realize that the relationship and the partnership that they've had will not last any long. And from November last year to March this year, in a few months, we saw how the tide changed, and the very electables that had chosen Imran Khan's party in the parliament on the advice of the military, from what we understand, uh, left him on the advice of the military. So definitely, the military did use him, but he was also being willing to be used. So it was a
Hmm.
mutually sort of beneficial relationship in that way. And now we're seeing that the military has used them and is wants to move on or wants to go back to the old players, but it won't be that easy. I mean, we've been saying that this is like a monster that the military has created, and you can't just put the genie back into the bottle,
Hmm.
and that's why we're going to see a lot of opposition, and I think in the coming days we're going to also see a lot of naming and shaming from the PTI for the military. As far as the military is concerned, I think the military right now continues to wield the same kind of power in Pakistan,
Hmm.
through they're invisible. They don't come out in the visible sort of,
Correct.
for they don't come out in the forefront. So in the background, they're still playing the same game, and now they're using Shahbaz Sharif, who is considered to be more amicable to the military, as their
Hmm.
front. And as long as Shahbaz Sharif, for example, does not interfere with their foreign policy agendas, with their defense policy agendas, with their budgets, etc., the military will let the civilians rule. So the civilians are more or less in Pakistan sort of a facade of democracy. They're on paper, but in reality, the real power lies and is exercised by the military, and that continues to happen. And anybody that challenges it, be it Imran Khan, as we saw, or previously, as we've seen, they don't live very long in the political office then.
Hmm. Rightly said, Taha. Democracy, like literally on paper, but military really controlling everything. Do you think that there's a lack of like a ideological commitment on part of all the parties that ever come to power in Pakistan? What goes
Well,
wrong?
well, in the 90s, we saw this, musical chair being played with People's Party and PMLN, with different parties like sort of partnering with the military to ouster each other. But then in the mid 2000s, they did have a charter of democracy signed, which was signed by Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif. Benazir is dead now, but they did sign this charter of democracy in which they said that not never in future again will they side with the military to come into power. But then the military found a third option, which was in terms of Imran Khan. And to remove Imran Khan from office, that charter of democracy has gone once again into the background. And we do know that, the People's Party and the
Taha,
PMLN.
Taha, I'm sorry, could I interrupt you there? Taha, I'm
Yes,
sorry, could I interrupt you there?
yes.
There seems to be a little bit of a lag because of the internet, I guess.
Is that fine now?
Are you there, Taha?
Yes, I can
Yeah,
hear
I
you.
mean, you're edible, but sorry, you're audible, but
I can actually hear you, but
are you there?
yes, I am there. I'm still here. Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Well, we live in the virtual world, so we have to do with the internet. Yeah. Taha, is it possible for you to connect again? Because I can hear you, but I can't
I'm
see
gonna
you
I'm gonna
properly.
I'm gonna try to go on a Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's fine. That's fine. You're back. You're back. Um, okay. Taha, I'm going to request you to, if you can connect again so that we
is
can
this better?
probably
Can you hear me
continue the
now?
interview.
No, no. Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. 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 Perfect.
Can you see
Please
me
go on.
now?
Sorry. Go on. Yeah, I can see you. I can hear you. All clear,
Okay,
perfect.
all
Please
right.
go
So
ahead.
yeah, I mean, as I was saying, so the Charter of Democracy was signed between the People's Party and the PMLN, and they did not want to side with the military ever again. But then when the military went to Imran Khan or created Imran Khan and brought him into power, I think the Charter of Democracy was thrown out of the window, so to say. And once again,
Hmm.
the opposition, the political opposition in the country, from what we understand, behind closed doors, made a deal with the military to come back into power, and once again has used the military to ouster the other party out. So again,
Hmm.
military continues to play the central role in the power broker, in power brokering between different political stakeholders, and political parties seem not to learn from their previous mistakes. But at the same time, I mean, the problem is that most of these political parties are not democratic to begin with. They're dynastic politics, and they have become larger than life because of military interventions in the past, making them victims of
Hmm.
political games. So, for example, the Bhuttos, which Zulfikar Ali Bhutto started as a minister in the military dictatorship. And then later on, he stood up to the military, and then the military hanged him. So then there's a victim narrative
Hmm.
about that. Then Benazir Bhutto also was killed during Musharraf's time. So then again, there's a victim narrative. So similarly with Nawaz Sharif, there's a victim narrative. So when there's this victim narrative, then people think that they've been wronged, and then they get some, they get they gain some political capital from it. And so the military continues to intervene in the political realm and the political sphere, and creating these political parties which are not genuine political parties to begin with, and then the victim narrative carries them
Hmm.
on. And then that's why Pakistan's sort of democracy and the parliament is captured and occupied by these forces which are not really democratic at the end of the day.
Right. Taha, since you are talking about the army and a dominant role that plays in the Pakistan politics and the Pakistan affairs altogether, I have to narrate an incident where when I lived in London for a couple of years, the Pakistanis that we met there, whenever I spoke to them, some of them were from Sialkot, and they would always be very, very either very confused about the political situation in Pakistan, always. They don't know what party to support, and there's almost like a distrust sort of a situation with every political leader that comes to power, or they're very, very scared of the army. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the general people of Pakistan? What do they think about this whole situation? I mean, there must be a situation of frustration at the moment.
Well, it depends on which general population you're talking about, because if you're talking about the urban elites, they are mostly, educated
Hmm.
urban elites. They're mostly, and that might be the people you might have met in London, because those are the ones who have the access to go to travel to London or study in London, etc. Those usually are supportive of of like mainstream parties like PTI right now, and they believe in that narrative
Hmm.
that all the other parties are corrupt. But that's a narrative that has been set through politicians, through manipulations of the media,
Hmm.
etc., by the military. So the politicians are dirty. That's the narrative that is set up.
Hmm.
As far as the military is concerned, the military is the savior of the country. The military is supposed to be the defender of the country, and that's the narrative again set up through media, etc. And again, I mean, at the end of the day, also what role does education in Pakistan play? For example, in schools, in universities, do they teach any critical thinking? Do they reflect upon Pakistan's past and how the military intervened, etc.? None of that is present. For example, let's suppose the 1971 Bangladesh civil war. Pakistanis do not get to learn about it, and what was the role of the Pakistan military in creating those divisions? What did General Ayub do? Then later on, what did General Ziaul Haq do in the form of what he brought the jihad from the Afghan jihad, etc. All of those things are missing. So when you don't have an understanding of history, when you do not have an understanding of critically looking at the past of Pakistan, then you have a very superficial population that we do have in Pakistan, which looks at everything very superficially, considers itself apolitical at times, and then also wants to sort of take out their anger towards politicians, because that's what they think is the reason why Pakistan is kind of a failed country, failed state. And then so this is all, the confusion is the design, by the state, so that people remain confused and none of these powers become strong enough to challenge the real power center, which is the military.
All right. Do you think, Taha, there is freedom of speech, and does the media and the press have any sort of freedom of speech in Pakistan, or is it totally entirely controlled by the military, by the army, or is it very obvious?
Well, military, the media in Pakistan is, enjoys some kind of independence, but not absolute independence. So there is independence to criticize politicians that the military tells them to criticize. So, for example, for the last 4 years or 5 years, PTI was not being criticized as much. The military did not allow that kind of criticism. And then there are topics which are completely off limits. For example, let's suppose Balochistan. When you want to talk about Balochistan in the Pakistani media, it's very difficult to talk about Balochistan. When it's about missing persons, for example, enforced disappearances, when it's about another topic which is religion, blasphemy, those are things that, so there are certain topics that you cannot talk about and certain topics that you can talk about. But the topics you can talk about and you cannot talk about are so interlinked and mixed with each other that at times people don't know what the red lines are, and that's why the Pakistani media is very much reliant on this idea of self-censorship. So they self-censor heavily, and they only end up covering what he said, she said kind of journalism. So they're just basically covering what politicians are saying or what certain pressure groups are saying, etc., but never critically analyzing them, never critically talking about them, and basically there are certain topics that they know those are the red lines. So freedom of speech does not exist in the way we would say that it should exist. And we've seen that the Reporters Without Borders Freedom Press Index has shown in the last 4 or 5 years that it has constantly fallen in the country, and the Pakistan has been ranked worse and worse on the Freedom Press Index. Journalists have lost their jobs in the last few years. The media houses which are independent have closed down or are financially struggling. And even with the new regime and the new government change, we haven't seen any promises made by the new incoming prime minister that he will allow the media to go free. We're seeing again that there's a clampdown on free speech when it comes to criticism of the military. So it's the same, it's the new faces but the same rules. Today also again we were seeing that in Balochistan, for example, there have been new cases of people going missing. There have been new cases of torture of the Baloch people. Again, it's only on social media. No mainstream media is covering it. So, there might be an illusion that the media is free and independent because there's so much media in Pakistan and it's really vibrant. But deep down, every journalist in Pakistan knows that there are certain things that they cannot talk about, and they will not talk about them.
Taha, if I could take it a little more personal, because you're a professor of journalism, the sort of students that you have, could you, talk to us about a little bit? What do you discuss with them? Let's say if you have any Pakistani students back in Paris, how is it? What are the discussions that go on? Are the youth very hopeful of the future of Pakistan?
Well, I mean, my students are usually international students. We don't have many Pakistani students. But at the same time, I do have South Asian students, and we do talk about freedom of press in South Asia. we're seeing that, I mean, as far as freedom of press is concerned, or the future of free press is concerned in Pakistan, that there's not much hope in that. In Pakistan, within Pakistan
Hmm.
also, there's a lot of the youth population is one of the largest populations in the country. Uh,
Hmm.
Recently we saw many universities also where they wanted to do, like, for example, there was a university that wanted to do in Lahore an event on Bangladesh, which I was saying earlier on, and they wanted to talk about what happened in Bangladesh. That event was cancelled. So even on university campuses, anything
Hmm.
which is political is sort of,
Hmm.
shied away from, and universities do not encourage any political sort of debates, any free ideas to freely flow in universities. So again, it's a very
Hmm.
controlled environment. Most universities do not even allow student unions. So there's no political activity in that way when it comes to having some kind of political understanding, political training that should happen at university levels for youngsters, for them to
Hmm.
understand how to work that,
Hmm.
because student unions were banned in the 1980s by General Ziaul Haq, the dictator, the military dictator of that time, and since then they have not been able to revive the student unions, and that's why, as I was saying earlier, Pakistan's political parties are not very genuine grassroots movements. They come in through a method of selection and elite circles from the top. So because of that, I mean, the youth also in Pakistan, it does not have that kind of independence, and I'm not sure how hopeful they are in the current given circumstances.
Hmm. Taha, if I could ask you about the role of India, now, how do you think that the Pakistan now views? How do they view India as an emerging power in the world, and India taking a very strong stance?
When it comes to India, I think, I mean, Pakistan has this sort of this tense relationship with India, uh, and I mean, I'd say that Pakistan continues to send these signals of, like, we want to be friends with India, etc. But at the same time, there's a lot of hatred that is taught uh, about India
Yeah.
in Pakistan, whether it's in the
Yeah.
schools, whether it's in the media, not just news media, but even entertainment media. Because of, and then there's the politicians, and of course there's the whole element of the jihadis, the jihadi groups that exist in Pakistan, which continue to exist under different names, under different banners. So one, sometimes they're called Lashkar e Taiba is called Jamaat Dawa, then it's called Milli Muslim League. Then there are these different sort of names that they keep on reinventing themselves with. There's Jaish-e
Hmm.
Mohammed, there's Hizbul Mujahideen, and all these parties in the last, all these jihadist sort of groups in the last few years have come under a lot of pressure and have gone low profile, but the
Hmm.
infrastructure still remains. And because of that, I think uh, the thing is, with why does Pakistan need India as an enemy, is because if
Hmm.
Pakistan does not have that enemy as India, the Pakistani
Yeah.
military loses one of its key sort of reasons to exist. And the
Right.
key reason for Pakistan military to exist is the threat that it has,
Hmm.
the external threat that it has, and it plays up that external threat to sort of justify its oversized presence in the country, its oversized budget, its sort of military interventions, etc. And so they ensure in every way possible that a low intensity conflict with India continues, whether it be in Kashmir, whether it be on the
Hmm.
line of control, whether it be on the line of
Hmm.
the actual control, the LAC or the international borders. There's always this this engineered sort of control, engineered chaos, engineered conflict that they want to continue, because if that doesn't happen, the military will cease to have the reason to exist in its oversized role that it has today in Pakistan. So that's how India's role is, or India is used in the Pakistani narrative, and I think that's going to continue unless and until the military changes its sort of its outlook. But I do not think the military can change its outlook overnight. First of all, because it's very entrenched into the military to have this anti-India sentiment and hatred, because it's their reasons for existence, and also because even if it does change, it will take many years for that mentality to change, and we do not see that happening right now. There's a lot of statements that come from the military all the time about we want to do friendship with India, or we want to have an economic partnership, etc., etc. But when it comes to practical steps taken to do that, we don't see those practical steps. We only see cosmetic steps. We only see Hafiz Saeed being convicted, but then living in his house very comfortably. We see Jaish-e-Mohammed banned, but Masood Azhar just disappearing from the scene, and nobody knows where he is anymore. I mean, of course we know where he is. Of course, I mean, not we, but of course the military knows where he is. And then that's just the jihadis. Then we have the whole, the Dawood Ibrahim linkage of, the mafia that Pakistan has, which runs a mafia in India. So that's also another, the criminal elements. So there's the jihadi elements, there's the criminal elements, and those, and so I mean, until and unless these are not dismantled and Pakistan does not change its outlook towards these policies, Pakistan and India, I don't think will get along ever.
Taha, although your answer has almost, already answered my next question, which is going to be, but I'll still ask it. My last question today. Do you think that China has already had a lot of vested interest in Pakistan and has invested hugely in Pakistan, almost so that some believe that Pakistan has almost become like a vassal state to China? And do you think that this situation is ever going to change? Pakistan is ever going to be able to take a very independent stance? Although you already mentioned that if that political instability doesn't exist, there's no reason for countries to invest in Pakistan. But again, your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, as far as China is concerned, China does use Pakistan to play its sort of game with India, and props up Pakistan in many ways to sort of counter India's balance. But India is a much bigger country. Pakistan is a much smaller country. At the same time, China basically is also heavily investing in Pakistan. But when we talk about Pakistan being Chinese state, I don't think it's a Chinese state. It's more of a colony. It's colonization of Pakistan and its resources, and we're going to see that Pakistan is their debt traps being set for Pakistan in the coming days. We're going to see what's happening in Sri Lanka, for example, what's happened in Africa, in Djibouti, for example, how China took over the local resources, the local ports, etc. And Pakistan will probably suffer from the same. So China is not, when it talks about investing in Pakistan, it's not investing in the people of Pakistan. It's investing in its own future to benefit for itself and some rich elites in Pakistan, which include the military and some rich elites. It's not coming down to the people. Even when China makes these projects in Pakistan, it brings its own labor. It brings its own sort of management. So there's no benefit that comes to the locals when it comes to this China-Pakistan economic corridor, for example, etc. And the real reason, I don't even think the real reason is economics for China to invest in Pakistan. It's more strategic. And strategic from a point of view of that they want access to the warm waters, they want access to the Arabian Ocean, and that's why they are using Gwadar as a base, where they're probably in future going to make a naval base, and then once that happens, it will be very hard for Pakistan to take back that from them. So in that sense, Pakistan is sort of walking with eyes open into this trap. But because China is filling the pockets of some elites, which are in the policy making, the rest of the people do not matter. And we're seeing that in the coming days, we'll see more and more of influence of China increasing, and the colonization becoming a serious problem. Already we're seeing, like for example in Gwadar, the locals cannot access the sea as they used to, because China, under security concerns, does not allow that. So they've made the locals outsiders in their own city. I mean, what kind of investment is that?
All right, Taha, I would have ended the interview, but the thing is, we've got a live question, and someone is very generously asked to talk a little bit about your personal story. If you could, talk to us a little bit about that.
About what?
About your personal story as to, how was your situation in Pakistan, and then you said that you had threats from the military. Could you talk to us about it?
Well, yeah, it's basically. I mean, I have been in Paris since 2018, so I've been in exile for the last 4 years. I had to leave the country in February 2018 after I survived a kidnapping and possible assassination attempt in January 2018. I was basically taken away by armed men, which I believe to be from the military, in broad daylight on Islamabad highway when I was traveling to the airport, and I was traveling for work that morning. I had to go for a few days outside Pakistan, and I was coming back. I mean, my family was in Pakistan, etc. And then I got kidnapped. And usually in Pakistan, when these kind of kidnappings happen, they end up in you disappearing forever. They end up in you being killed and your body being dumped somewhere. Or in some cases, you are lucky that they torture you and they basically keep you in a secret prison for some time, and then they let you go on the conditions that you do not speak of them and the military anymore. But thankfully, I managed to escape while the kidnapping was ongoing, and they had taken me away, and I managed to escape. I was very lucky. Shortly after that, I met with the interior minister of Pakistan at that time, Ehsan Iqbal, who invited me to his office and told me privately that the Pakistani government did not have any issues with me. And from what he found out, he said that General Bajwa, who's right now the army chief, his military has an issue with me. And he asked me to apologize to the military and send a letter of apology. And when I asked him what should I apologize for, because I did not even know what my crime was, supposed crime, the honorable minister said that just say that I ask for apology for everything and anything that I might have done, which was completely absurd for me. I was being told by a sitting interior minister to apologize to someone who's supposed to be technically under him, because the interior minister is technically higher in hierarchy than an army chief. But he was telling me to apologize to his subordinate, and he told me he's helpless. Then he also told me that, the next time the military will come, they will not try to take you away directly like that. They might just kill you on the spot. And a lot of people told me that. And when I sort of realized that the government is helpless, this was the election year. Imran Khan was supposed to come into power that year through selection of the military. And so a lot of people told me that, like, it's better that you be quiet. But I did not want to be quiet. I was wronged. I was attacked. I was not told why I was almost killed. I also was not allowed to do my, before that attack, I was being threatened for many years by the military. So all of that made me realize that perhaps it was time that I should take some distance from Pakistan and maybe revisit Pakistan when things normalize. So I came to France, because I had a lot of French connections. I was working for the French media, and I ended up here in Paris. Once I arrived here, a few months into my stay here, I was contacted by two Western intelligence agencies who told me that they had intercepted communication originating from Pakistan, which talked about assassinating Pakistanis. And it was a communication that they had intercepted from the state organs. They did not tell me exactly which state organ, but I think it was the military that they were eavesdropping. I mean, all intelligence agencies do that. So they shared with me this information, and they told me that your name is on that assassination list. So there is a possibility that you will be killed. Not a possibility, but a certainty that you will be killed if you go back to Pakistan, if you go to any Pakistan friendly countries, and be careful in Paris also. So ever since then, I realized that my doors to go back to Pakistan have closed, perhaps forever, or until I continue to speak the way I'm speaking in this interview, or the way I continue to write, etc. So, and I do not want to give up that right. I do not want to give up my right to critically evaluate Pakistan and Pakistani military. And because of that, I continue to live in exile. Now in Paris, as you told your audience earlier, I teach here at Sciences Po. At the same time, I manage a place called the Dissident Club. It's a cafe and a bar where we do intellectual activities, political activities, and we gather different kind of political dissidents from around the world. So anyone who is in Paris, please drop by whenever you are at the Dissident Club. You'll probably find me behind the counter there. And I continue to write, and I'm also in the process of publishing my first book, which is supposed to come out later this year. So that's a little bit about my personal life.
Thank you, Taha, because thank you for your detailed story and sharing it with us. I have to admit that it's rare to find someone would talk about Pakistan in a very balanced fashion, because the aim of our interview also was not to do the whole blaming Pakistan and go into the India-Pakistan rant. That was not the intention, and it's rare to find someone who can critically analyze the situation as it is right now. So thank you so much for taking our time, and thank you so much for talking to Bharat Voice.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me, and we keep in touch.
Thank you.